All right. So my presentation is a little different in the fact that we're talking about honors curriculum design to fight racism. We are at Prairie View A&M University, and this is a historically Black college and university. So we decided to look more into the one of our courses we teach, honors colloquium, and get student feedback to determine how the class actually impact their perspectives on racism itself. Just a little bit about the program. This program was established in 2010. There was a Benjamin Banneker Honors College that actually it ran out until like 1998, and so this was the reemergence of honors education here on campus. And so the program is designed for rigorous and enhancement to the academic profiles of majors across the campus. Some data actually started with the program in 2018. So data up to 2018 showed that students took about Chinese, 98% of the students took Chinese, or we had 2% taking Arabic. We have thus included Spanish as a language option for the students since 2019. 97% of the students actually finish in a 4-year period and attend professional and graduate school. 96% of the students up to 2018 actually did 6 weeks in Xi'an, uh, learning Chinese in a more intimate way. And then we have students who've traveled or study abroad from China to Ghana to South Africa, Costa Rica, Cuba, Italy. We have Switzerland, Rome. So they've traveled. We almost had Mexico, but COVID stopped that. So let's get into the meat of the presentation and the fact that with our first year experience, the students take a course called Honors Colloquium. And so the course does focus on African descent, people in Western constructs. In this class, they develop critical thinking, writing and reading skills. They're analyzing, understanding, and debating topics. This is considered a high impact practice based on all that we put into this one class. They have a platform speaking, discussing different topics. And at the end of it, we hope that the students become a agent of change. So they get a chance to see things in a different light and move forward. So the students that we're dealing with in this presentation represent a diverse group of students from several different backgrounds. And so each cohort of students get a chance to really have a deeper dive into the different constructs of this class that we're talking about. So as I said my proposal in earlier, we dealt with the statement of the problem. And when we look at racism, we have to understand that racism can be defined in many ways. The existence of racism exists at social, political, and economic levels, and it deals with a systemic oppression of a racial group. With its systemic pressure, we got to think about today's society. I mean, just even recently, we had issues that dealt with race. And so the consequences of racism is not a pretty picture. And so, what about the power to change? The power to change exists within the generation of scholars that we teach in our programs. They have the power to change what racism is all about. And within the honors curriculum, students are engaged in those that they say that elephant in the room, they're engaged with those questions. They talk about race, talk about racism, speak on culture, they write about it. And so through a intellectual discovery, we're seeking to provide solutions and insight into uh, this overall issue. So within the program has had some changes. The former director actually taught this course for 8 years, and the emphasis was on Hollywood, movies, television, sports, and current events. In 2018, when I became director, the two of us, we actually co-taught this class. But then we made some changes to it where we brought in Dr. Shapey, who's a philosopher, a professor, and he actually he actually teaches our fall course. And so he uses different books in his teaching, and he even uses art, creative art, to express how the students learn about the different concepts in the class. And in the spring, we brought in a new professor, Dr. Robinson, And with his class, he teaches from a seminar-based approach. He brings in outside speakers, and the students have different dialogues based on different topics dealing with race, culture, and racism. So with the program, we've had about 266 students who have pretty much been part of this program. Over 155, the number is a little higher now, have actually graduated through the program. And so we're going to start looking at the feedback that came out of the program, out of the actual course itself. And pretty much the importance of these discussions, it leads to why we must have these conversations. So asking a student their feedback from taking a course, and the student brings up some key words. Talk about how the course empowered them, how the course gave them a strong sense of self and a spirit willing to overcome. It actually gave them I guess if you think about the conversation pieces to actually discuss and have conversations on racism and how to be an influence in a positive light and not actually look at it in a negative standpoint. We move on to a additional student. They actually said this course actually opened their eyes to think outside the box. Even also taught them how to actually keep high expectations for themselves. The course built their understanding. It helped them to navigate through modern society. And we had one student who actually spent most of this time overseas having a military family. And so they was exposed to all different cultures except their own. And in the honors colloquium course, it was the first time they had a chance to actually take a deeper dive into what was Black culture and not see, because they didn't see it in the history books. So they have a conversation about it. Student talked about being originally from a different country. They always was enriched in cultural experiences, but the program actually, the course actually taught them how to never stop learning about cultures. The student talked about, gave them an opportunity to explore the world and immerse themselves in a different culture. And then, I have students who said that growing up, they never paid much attention to race or how people was treated because of it. And so it gave them opportunity to look at this in a different light, in a different light. All right. So as we go on to this discussion, the honors program gave them opportunity to think outside the box to the world and also open their perspective on many social issues. So when we look at evaluation, we're going to look at the collection and analysis and the interpretation of the program and information they're receiving from this program. The colloquium gave them a different perspective and a understanding. And this is from a young man who's actually in the Marines Corps now. Taking the course allowed them to be able to relate better to his fellow Marines that are around him. The colloquium course also gave a critical piece in developing critical thinking skills. With the education of it, we know education from an enlightening experience. And so when we think about it, they were able to fight against racism and being more comfortable in actually having those conversations. And they also realized that people being racist because they are not educated on the subject. So being in a place where they can thoroughly and intellectual educate someone who has racist views compared to just having some all-out confrontation. So the course, it not only inspired them to not only recognize racism, but also fight against it. And also make them aware that they're not just a minority, but they actually are part of majority. So it didn't just make them feel like they're superior or inferior, but it allowed them to see that they're on a level playing field, just using the intellectual mindset compared to just random words that lead nowhere. And also there's an obligation not only to correct when racist words are spoken, but also educate and change. So when we think about exposure, evaluation, education, these are all comments from one student here. And the student grew up in a predominantly white community. They wasn't really aware of when racism was occurring. Racial slurs were thrown, but they really just didn't pay attention to it. When they got a chance to evaluate it, it gave them the chance to take a more in-depth view and also expand their knowledge. And so in the education piece of it, they're able to evaluate the racism better by teaching more, by learning more about the history, being able to teach it, being able to provide open dialogue and discussion. So all these were comments from students who took it up to 2018 from a different perspective. Now, going the wrong way. All right. So we switched it a little bit, and when we brought in Dr. Shapey, he decided to teach the students the different concepts about race, racism, culture, but then he brought a different twist to it. He added art to it. And so that one of the students' final projects was actually to take the concepts learned in class and create an art piece illustrating. And so it was the relationship of race and racism to art itself. And it allowed the students to communicate in different media. I mean, just be creative. So one of the pieces I want to pretty much end my conversation on is this one here. This is a painting by one of first year students. And in the painting itself, there's a African American hand that's holding on to dear life. And in the words, it's negative words associated in society, from incarcerated to killings to sexism to colorism and even segregation. But also within the painting itself are words that represent positive things: strong, empowerment, equal, and pride. And so with the importance of this painting, it's talking more about the symbolic of racial inequalities of African Americans. The students say it represents our struggles to progress and succeed for hundreds of years. It also is a representative of a need for increased diversity. And so, I mean, all this came from actually the students' insight and what they learned in the class. I know my time is up. So a bigger platform for discussion of the challenges that exist among racism is required for the true eradication of this pandemic. Exposure, evaluation, and education are the pillars that will promote the reversal and re-education of cultures. And starting this conversation seems to be the most challenging step. And until it has occurred, the change will not happen.